I always believed neighbors looked out for each other until mine tried to erase me. One spark turned into a blaze, and my home was gone. But they made one mistake, thinking I was just an ordinary man. When I moved into the neighborhood, I was chasing peace, quiet mornings, fresh air, a place to finally breathe. The HOA seemed like background noise, harmless and forgettable. But everything shifted the moment I declined their offer to join. That no made me their target. First came the warning letters, then the ridiculous fines, overgrown grass, a garden hose left out. Soon I noticed eyes watching me, cameras that weren't mine. Whispers turned into threats. And then, one night, fire swallowed my home whole. What they didn't realize? The man they thought they could scare into silence was trained to hunt people like them. At first, it was the kind of nonsense you roll your eyes at. Petty, almost laughable. A note in my mailbox claiming the color didn't fit the approved community palette. A fine for an untrimmed lawn, issued less than 24 hours after I'd mowed it. Minor annoyances, sure, but when it kept happening, again and again, like clockwork. I knew it wasn't just about grass or paint. The HOA wasn't trying to correct me. They were trying to push me. I started keeping records, dates, times, photos. I even kept copies of every bogus violation they sent, but they escalated faster than I expected. One evening, I caught a man crouched behind my hedges, camera in hand. His HOA badge practically glowed in the moonlight. When I stepped outside and asked what the hell he was doing, he didn't even flinch. He just smirked and said I was being monitored for noncompliance. I reported it. No one cared. Then came Karen. Karen was the president of the HOA board. She didn't just enforce the rules, she was the rules. The kind of person who'd measure the angle of your parked car just to file a complaint. She wore power like perfume, and behind her PTA smile was a mind wired for control. I'd seen people like her before, back when I was still active in the bureau. She started showing up more. First during her daily walks, lingering by my property line just a little too long. Then came the chain of complaints, fake noise violations, claims that my house was bringing down property values. Someone slashed my tires. My outdoor lights were unscrewed. I found trash dumped on my lawn. Twice. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Karen had her own little army, and they were following her orders like it was war. The neighbors turned cold. Some started avoiding eye contact. Others whispered when I walked by. One even crossed the street when I came outside. The message was clear. I was being isolated. But the final straw, the moment I knew I was dealing with something beyond petty vendettas, was when I woke up to find orange construction fencing wrapped across my driveway. A posted notice claimed it was now a community-controlled easement. When I tried to move it, two HOA reps came storming up, claiming I was trespassing on shared property. Trespassing on my own land. They pushed, hoping I'd snap. They wanted anger, a mistake, anything they could use against me legally. I stayed quiet, but I didn't back down. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept listening for footsteps, for the creak of leaves. I knew something was coming. Call it instinct. Call it training. I'd felt it too many times before, just before a target made their move. Then the fire came. It started in the dead of night. No storm, no electrical fault, just a sudden roar. Flames devouring wood, glass shattering, alarms screaming. I made it out, barely. But the house? Gone. Reduced to smoldering rubble and scorched memories. The fire department gave me the usual lines. Could have been faulty wiring. Maybe something in the garage. But I knew better. I'd seen burn patterns like that before. And when the investigators weren't looking, I sifted through what was left, and I found it. A melted container. The faint smell of accelerant. They wanted me out of their neighborhood. They didn't care how. What they didn't know, what they never expected, was that the man they tried to erase was someone who'd spent 2 decades exposing people just like them. I didn't just survive the fire. I walked out with purpose, and I was done playing by their rules. In the days after the fire, I played the part of the broken man, quiet, cooperative, letting the insurance folks do their job, letting the HOA think they'd won. But in reality, I wasn't grieving. I was gathering. Because here's what they didn't know. I'm not just some retired homeowner. I spent 23 years with the FBI. I've investigated high-level corruption, tracked organized crime, and pulled confessions out of men who thought they'd never crack. I know how to follow trails, and I know how to make people talk without them even knowing they're talking. So while they were busy patting themselves on the back for finally getting rid of the problem on Pinewood Lane, I was busy rebuilding, not my house, but my case. First, I traced the funding. HOAs love paper trails, and Karen was no different. She ran the books like a little queen, except she wasn't half as clever as she thought. Misused funds, personal purchases on the HOA account, contractor invoices paid to companies that didn't exist. It didn't take much to follow the money, straight to her personal bank account. Then came the security footage. While they'd torn down my cameras during one of their compliance checks, they missed the one I'd hidden in the fake vent by my back gate, one I used to use for surveillance training back in Quantico. Guess what it caught? A man in an HOA polo sneaking around my garage with a gas can the night before the fire. I ran his face through a private database. Local handyman paid in cash by a shell company Karen registered 3 months earlier. Sloppy, desperate. But I wasn't just after the arsonist. I was after the entire operation. I reached out to some old friends in law enforcement. Not official calls, just quiet conversations. I dropped breadcrumbs, sent files, asked questions I already knew the answers to. Within days, interest turned into a formal inquiry. And Karen? She started getting nervous. I saw her pacing outside her house one evening, phone glued to her ear, eyes scanning the street like shadows were closing in. Because they were. She thought I was gone, a burned-out old man without a home, without allies, without power. She had no idea I was the storm that had just pulled in. I subpoenaed the HOA's internal communications, used her own bylaws against her. That's when the real gold came out. Emails, dozens of them. Karen instructing board members to target me, to fine me for violations that didn't exist, to fabricate witness reports. There was even one where she told someone to make it look like an accident. That was enough. By the end of the week, I had a file thick enough to bury a reputation. Evidence of embezzlement, conspiracy, arson, harassment, and civil rights violations. I packaged everything and delivered it, first to the local police, then to a contact in the U.S. Attorney's Office. No more warnings, no more waiting. When the officers pulled up in front of Karen's house, sirens off but cuffs ready, I watched from across the street. She came out screaming, protesting, crying, and then she saw me, just standing there, calm, silent. And for the first time since this began, she said nothing, because she finally realized what she was up against. The arrest was only the beginning. By the time Karen was booked, word had already begun spreading through the neighborhood. The queen of the HOA had fallen, and no one was rushing to defend her. The people who once obeyed her, out of fear, now scrambled to distance themselves, as if the stench of her corruption could stick to their skin. But I wasn't done. You see, in this country, justice doesn't always come in handcuffs. Sometimes it comes in paperwork, in courtrooms, in truth laid bare for the world to see. So I made sure every bit of evidence I had didn't just end up in a case file, it ended up in the hands of every homeowner who had ever been targeted by that HOA. Dozens of them came forward, fines that were made up, properties taken through intimidation, money unaccounted for. The deeper the investigators dug, the darker it got. Karen's empire wasn't just built on power trips, it was built on fraud, real estate scams, rigged board elections, backdoor deals. At the next emergency HOA meeting, held under federal supervision no less, I stood up. They'd rebuilt a temporary office inside the community center. Same chairs, same tired faces, but everything felt different. This time, the fear was on the other side of the table. The board members sat silently as I walked to the front, placed a thick folder on the table, and spoke words I'd waited months to say. You fined me for a mailbox. You tried to silence me over landscaping. You burned my home to get rid of me. But you forgot one thing. I don't play by your rules. I enforce the ones you thought you could ignore. Then I handed over the deeds. One by one, I had purchased multiple properties in the neighborhood under anonymous LLCs. Rentals, flips, even a few that Karen herself had marked as problem homes. I now held enough stake in the HOA to legally call for a vote to dissolve it, and that's exactly what I did. The motion passed. Karen's precious power structure came crumbling down in front of the very people she once ruled over. The board resigned in disgrace. Lawsuits followed, civil, criminal, financial. But perhaps the most satisfying moment? Watching Karen walk into court, hands shackled, her once perfectly styled hair a mess, face hollowed by sleepless nights. The same woman who once threatened to fine me for lowering the neighborhood's standards now stood accused of conspiracy, arson, fraud, and racketeering. She looked at me. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. She knew. The community changed after that. The fear was gone. People waved again, spoke to each other, helped instead of reported. The ashes of my home became a foundation for something better. And as for me, I started building again, brick by brick, peacefully this time, but always watching because people like Karen don't work alone. And sometimes when power falls, others come running to pick it back up. But now they know. They know who I am, and they know exactly what happens when they cross the wrong man. You'd think after the arrests, the courtroom victories, and the collapse of the HOA, that would be the end of it. But sometimes when you cut off the head of the snake, the tail still moves. A few days after Karen's sentencing, I received something, hand-delivered. No postage, no prints, just a plain white envelope with a single message inside. She wasn't acting alone. No name, no signature, just the truth. There's more beneath the surface, more people, more power, and they've just realized I'm not going away. So while I rebuild my home, I stay alert. Because this story isn't over. Not yet. And if you've ever been bullied by an HOA, trust me, you're not alone. Drop your story in the comments. I'm listening. And don't forget to subscribe. The next part of this story, it's already unfolding.